Welcome to League Legends on Fox Sports. That old saying that a good big player will always beat a good smaller one has fallen foul of some notable exceptions in rugby league. Normally they're hookers or halfbacks, loaded with cheek and brimming with confidence. But if you add to those two traits a towering ability, then a picture begins to form of our guest this time. For Balmain, New South Wales and Australia, he was a giant. And more importantly, he set the bar very high for all hookers to follow. Ben Elias, welcome to League Legends.
Thank you. I'm very overwhelmed by this, I've got to say, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, would it be true to say that it doesn't matter who thinks you're small, as long as it's not you?
This is true. It's funny, you know, you talk about your stature, and I am, you know, very small compared to the normal NRL player. And many moons ago, there was a great journalist by the name of Ray Chesterton. He was a man that wrote terrific articles, and he ghost wrote for Ian Walsh, who was the great hooker for the Dragons back in the heyday. And Walsh, he always said, I was playing at schoolboy football, and he always stated that this kid is too small to play first grade football. And I read that, and I cut that article out and I put it on the fridge, because my dream ever since I was 7 was to play first grade football, and you just had to defy the odds. And I finally got there at first grade, and then an article he wrote, again ghostwritten by Ian Walsh, said he's too small to play representative football. So I put that and blew it right up on the fridge and made it sure that that was certainly a goal to be achieved, and, you know, again, to defy the odds and to defy a bloke like Ian Walsh, who was a legend of the game, was, you know, certainly a challenge. And you had that goal to achieve, and nothing was going to stop me.
The answer to where you got your indestructible confidence must surely lie in the fact that you are the only player in Origin history to share the field with your mother. I mean,
yeah.
It says something, doesn't it, about where you got your confidence from?
I think it's the love and the nature of mothers, and I think every mother out there can certainly relate to my mother at the time.
There she is, there, Barbara.
Yeah, she, you know, I was split from ear to ear, and blood was pouring out of my head, and I just think the norm or the reaction of a mother, you know, nurturing her son, just came out. She jumped a 6-foot fence. She got through all the security.
That's right.
And
yeah.
I looked over my shoulder, and there's my mother there saying, "Are you all right, Ben? Are you all right?" And she's wiping the blood off my head. And
yeah.
it was very, very special, because that was a very special game, that one. We had to win that game. And we had a lot of casualties. We had Laurie Daly and Bradley Clyde come off in the first 10 minutes. And it was a special moment. And to share that with my mother at the time was extraordinary.
You're one of 7 kids of an immigrant family who came to Australia with pretty much nothing except hope and an incredible work ethic. Is that fair? That's a fair summary.
That's very fair, because my father actually had to loan some money off his brother to fly out here to start his life over here in the early 60s, and it certainly was it was a hard road for him. You know, back then you used to get rewarded for working 3 jobs, and I think anyone out there listening or watching now, knowing the ethnic backgrounds, that their parents came out there and they worked 3 jobs, and all they wanted to do was put food on the table, get the best possible education for their kids, and they lived for their children. And my family was that, and my father and mother were my heroes. You know, you look at them and you educate, and you see that there is no substitute for hard work in everything that they did. It was always hard work. They didn't have the talent, they didn't have the skills, they just worked hard, and that sort of, you know, I think that was inherited to myself and my other siblings.
Norm and Barbara weren't too keen on rugby league, though, were they? Now, why did you rebel against that?
Well, look, the game in Lebanon and all around Europe and all around the world was the round ball, the soccer ball. And I fell in love with this game. I remember just watching Rex Mossop and listening to Rex Mossop call the football on Channel 7. You know, it was just bigger than Ben Hur for me. I loved it. I just fell in love with something that became my affiliation to be so much part of that game. And as a young kid at 7 years of age, everyone was playing soccer, and I decided to go the other way, and I just fell in love with it, Tim.
But you were an outsider in a lot of ways. You're an immigrant, so you literally gravitate towards a game where not only do you get a hard time, but you're physically not that big. So it's going to be tough, isn't it?
This was the Australian game. Rugby league was the Australian game. I was the ethnic, I was the little wog, the little fella. I mean, you talk about racism today in the game, and when it's headline news, if someone's called a name, my God, all the way through my football career, all the way, from the moment I could remember till the day I retired, I had every superlative of the English language known.
You heard them all.
Every one of them, and you just defied it. You know, you just rolled your sleeves up and just kept going.
How much did that nursery that you got access to in the end, Holy Cross College Ride in Sydney, what role did that play in polishing you and completing you as a player?
Well, as a kid, Holy Cross was the rugby league school, and there was another school, Morris Brothers Eastwood, which my other two brothers went to, and I avoided going there because I didn't want to be involved with the rugby union fraternity. I wanted the rugby league. So I begged, squeezed and pleaded to Dad, and there was a great bloke, he was a brother at the school at Holy Cross, Brother Columban, who went and he spoke to Dad and begged and pleaded for Dad for me to go to Holy Cross because I was this up-and-coming young kid, and he took me under his wings. And two great men, John O'Brien and Kevin Smythe. Kevin Smythe actually played for Australia as a lock forward behind Chook Raper. They were the coaches at the time, and I'll never forget it, Tim. They taught you about life, and they related everything to life with rugby league, and they said, you know, in life you've got to make these sacrifices. In life, you know, you've got to have discipline. In life, you've got, and all these same principles were applied to rugby league, and you know, sort of took that on in my world and in my life as a family man, and also as in the workforce.
Again, more polish was put on and applied by the Australian schoolboys experience, wasn't it? You'd been mentored by these marvellous people who knew all about the game and life, and then you were playing in terrific company, weren't you, in those schoolboy sides?
Yeah, the Australian schoolboy was certainly my first big step into the real world of rugby league. I was all of 15 years of age, and I was playing with the 18-year-old players, 3 years above, these people were shaving and they were having beer, and I'm a 15-year-old kid, so naive to all this. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm rubbing shoulders with people like Neil Hunn and Tony Rampley and Ian Barclay, Glenn Mortimer, and these people were fairly well-known players already in the big world. And I'm just finishing. I'm in year 10 at school, all of 15 years of age, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm actually rubbing shoulders with these blokes. And I was very fortunate to go to England and France and spend 6 weeks with these players over there. And that education was, you know, phenomenal for my transition into the big world. You're
spotted, obviously. In those teams, you're always going to get seen, and you sign a contract with Balmain. When you went there, Ben, the most impressive game you played early on wasn't at hooker, was it?
No, it was I played halfback, and I'll never forget. Frank Stanton was the coach at the time, and Frank was very sure. We had the club captain there, Neil Whittaker, who was our club captain and had been for 3 years. So he's this young punk sort of coming through the ranks, and Frank says, I've got to put you into this side somewhere. So have you played halfback? And I said, I used to play a halfback many years ago as a young kid. He said, well, mate, today you're playing number 7, and Neil, you're number 9. And that game was at Redfern Oval. I played 2 games, and I got man of the match that game as halfback. And then the following week we were playing against Western Suburbs, and I was up against Terry Lamb and a bloke by the name of Greg Cox, who was one of my heroes at the time.
Good player too.
Great player. Yeah. Great. He was one of my heroes as a young kid growing up, and there's Greg Cox there, and
a big strong guy as well.
Oh yeah. He knew me better than myself, and he made sure that this young punk was not. And he was a Holy Cross boy also, Greg Cox, and he was making sure that I wasn't going to go anywhere that day, and mate, I went from my best game at halfback to the very, very worst game of my career the following week. So that was the end of my channel, number 7.
But is that what you really were, a halfback playing hooker in some respects?
Well, you know, it was a very stereotyped role, the number 9, or number 12 back then. It was 12 and then it went to number 9. But as a hooker, it was pick the ball up, win the ball in the scrum and just go through the motions. And I couldn't do that. I just had to do a little bit more than that. And I tried things at dummy half, and one thing led to another. And there was a bloke by the name of Harry Raven when I was coming through the ranks. He said, mate, you know, try things, do different things at where you are, because, you know, this is a position where the focal point is. You're touching the ball more than anybody on the football paddock, so it's up to you to decide what you want to do. And through that, you know, I decided to, you know, kick the football from dummy half, and used to show and go and try and be a little bit more creative from dummy half. And that sort of that stereotype number, that stereotype role went from that to doing things, and all of a sudden you became well known.
You came into State of Origin in 1985. Your timing was perfect, Ben, as always. You know, a great year.
Look, it was. Look, Terry Fernley was the coach, and he had the courage to pick young kids. And I plead today to the New South Wales side, have a go. Have the courage to get young talent. It was 1985. We hadn't won a State of Origin series. I got selected, and it was Christmas for me. I mean, my dream had come true. The year before, I was out at the Sydney Cricket Ground watching with my mates the 84 State of Origin series, and only dreaming of being there. And 12 months later, you're there, you know, and you're rubbing shoulders with the great Steve Mortimer, and, you know, you're playing with your captain Wayne Pearce in the side, and Blocker Roach and Gary Jack and Michael O'Connor, Steve Ella, Eric Growth. Great names of the past who you were part of, and all of a sudden you're rubbing shoulders with them, and you're doing something for the very first time, is to try and win a State of Origin series off Queensland. Your first game's at Lang Park, capacity crowd. It's
and they love you. They just absolutely love you.
It was certainly
boy, oh boy. Yeah.
It was, and that started that started my representative journey up there, and I got to say, I've never had an inspirational captain which had so much of an impact than Steve Mortimer. And I'll say right now, the reason we turned the corner for State of Origin for New South Wales was Steve Mortimer. The passion, the emotion was just amazing, and that oozed on to all the players. And the day that he stopped that bus up there at Lang Park and he told everybody in front of the Caxton Hotel that all these Queenslanders hate you. They hate us. Every one of these Queenslanders hate us, and they did. They were booing, they were throwing big cans at the bus, and they were chanting, and it just got us more and more excited. And I'll never, ever forget it, that moment, how someone can change your life, just changed mine. And I'd say probably the other 16 players in that bus that were there, I reckon that was one of the real game changers of State of Origin football.
Ben, your arrival at Balmain roughly coincided with that of Frank Biscuit Stanton, and he began to build the club, or rebuild it. In '85, you almost got him a premiership, and Canterbury were your nemesis. What influence did you see him as having on the club?
Oh, Frank was remarkable. He was the Australian coach, and Balmain did something extraordinary. Keith Barnes saw the talent in Frank Stanton, and Frank Stanton came and kept the great players together, and did very similar to what Bellamy has done over in Melbourne. He kept the sides, he kept the nucleus, the Gary Jack, fullback, he kept Blocker Roach, myself, Wayne Pearce, at the club there. The four of us, we stayed all the way through, and he maintained the nucleus of that Balmain side. That was the backbone, and that's what he focused on.
A big part of rugby league is rivalries, the book of feuds. Yep. And sometime in the 80s, you and Mario Fenech became great rivals and enemies. Now, why was it that you squared up against Mario more so than most other players, excluding Steve Walters, but we'll deal with him later? What was it about Mario?
You know, Mario and I go back a long way before grey football. We go back in South Sydney and Balmain Juniors at SG Ball and Jersey Flag. And we were both, it's funny, with a lot of similarities. With a lot of similarities comes a lot of conflict. He comes from a very close ethnic family, Maltese. He comes, you know, with a lot. He comes to the game with a lot of passion and emotion, and, you know, wears his heart on the sleeve, and a real passionate bloke. I'm the same. If we were playing South Sydney that week, the back page would be, they'd be start really steaming it up with quotes from Mario and myself about each other. And it was good. I thought it was good, Tim. I'm proud of that. I've got a lot of regard for Mario, a lot of respect for him. Obviously, he's a terrific man and has done enormous things since retiring from football. But look, I've only got respect and regard for that. But I thought it was healthy.
Going to show you a bit of footage and get you to explain it to us afterwards. Let's have a look at this.
Oh, okay.
A penalty to Balmain, a little bit of a flare-up, and players pulled out of it. Oh! He sent Fennick off. Been sent off.
Okay.
Wow.
What did happen there?
Well, before the scrum, I said to Block, "Can you start a sting?" And Blocker looked at me and he goes, "What?" And knowing Blocker, as day goes tonight, if you're going to ask Block to put a stink on, he's going to put a stink on. So I knew he was going to put a stink on. And he looked at me and says, "Boy, you should be the captain." Like, mate, no problem. Anytime you... And he pat me on the back and, you know, he just gave me a big wink, and he went in and there was Les Davison was opposition, and, mate, it was on for young and old. As you could see, it was on for young and old. And we were in all sorts of strife, losing by a fair few points. And we needed to do something to try and turn the game. I thought we'd just try and steal a penalty. And then I bit my hand pretty vigorously before the scrum was packed. And anyway, as day goes tonight, Block, as the great student that he was, put on a great stink, and I flung out of the scrum and screamed at Kevin Roberts, saying, "Mate, look at Mario's bitten my hand." And Kevin Roberts looked around and he goes, "Yes, don't worry, Benny, I saw it all." He said, "Fennick, you're off." So I didn't think it was going to be that harsh.
He cut such a tragic figure, didn't he, walking off? He was just miserable.
But Murray, if you've seen that, he was saying, "Oh, look at my eye, my eye." We were both at each other, like hammer and tong. It was just sort of who could get the final, and that was the final punch.
You know, one of the really funny things about it is you get picked for your first kangaroo tour, you go off and you play Bradford, and who's there waiting for you?
Oh, I know.
Mario.
Oh, I know. He was haunting me. He was haunting me. He wouldn't let me go. I mean, he was much bigger than me also, Mario, and he's a lot stronger, and so I had to be very clever and make sure that Blocky was always looking after me. So it was a lot of fun.
When you wrote your book with Ian Heads, and it's a very forthright book, you spent the first chapter dealing straight up with what it was like to be charged with something that you're completely innocent of, and it was thrown out of court, and that was that. And you wrote about the, I guess, the postscript, you know, the wash-up. And it was to make that your first chapter and to take it head on like that. I
think in life, you know, Tim, you realise you want to get things off your chest and let the world know, because I went through a very, very tough time in my life then.
You nearly quit, didn't you?
Oh, mate, I absolutely gave up on life, you know, and I've never been more at a lower ebb in my life than I was in 1987. You know, it was, and that's the reason I wrote that book. The only reason I wrote that book was to tell people that I was purely innocent of something I wasn't charged for. It didn't even go to trial.
Get to court.
It didn't even get to court, but it was still. Because it was my name, I just got back from the Kangaroo Tour in '86. It was headline news, front page, back page of every paper in the country, headline news on the TV. It was ugly. And it wasn't me. I could hold my shoulders and walk into a plug, because I knew I was strong and I didn't have anything to worry about. It wasn't me that I was worried about. It was about my friends, my family, my girlfriend at the time. I felt so sorry for those people who were trying to comfort me, and they were equally as upset. So it was a dark time of my life, a very, very dark time. But that's life, and you learn. And I'll never forget my father saying this, Tim. He said, "God tests you on many moments in your life, and this is one of your tests. And you either pin your shoulders back and get on with it, or you can wash away and become a nobody." And I'll never forget that day. These things are meant to test you. And that was a big test.
Biscus Stanton leaves Balmain at the end of 1986 and the house is in very good shape. Bill Anderson comes and goes, then Wazza Ryan turns up, and in 1988 the Tigers go on a bit of a tear. Let's have a look at something very typical of the team at that time.
Yep. Operation is Michael Neal. He's with Bill Anderson sideline.
Mick, 4 points to 2. That's a handy lead considering you're going into the win.
Hold it there, Bill, because Big Blocker's got to pass away to Robinson. Robinson down the touchline. Infield pass for Hanley. Hanley looks for support. Is it there? Yes, it's there. He was having running Elias. Elias will score into the post. A sensational Balmain try. Started by number 11, Steve Roach.
The joys of Leichhardt and playing like that. Incredible stuff, wasn't it?
Mate, fantastic. Mate. And Blocky, I mean, I've got to say...
What about the pace? What about the pace?
It wasn't the pace, it was the ball playing front rower.
Yeah.
You know, and we've lost that today, you know. Again, we lose that today in the game, in the modern era. Blocker had this ability to throw the ball around.
He's quick off the mark, though.
He was. I mean, he was a big unit, powerful, strong, and all he had to do was bursts of 5 or 10 metres. That's all he. And that's why when we were training, he wouldn't run 400 metres. He's going, when have you ever scored a 400 metre try? So he never focused on the 400. What are these 400 metre runs for?
What are we doing?
He wants the spurts, and he was 100% right, Bloggy.
Yeah. Look, just briefly, the 1988 grand final. There was a huge lunch, wasn't there, the day before the match? There was a lot of hoopla about Balmain making it. Oh, my goodness. Was it a bit too much, mate?
Look, in 88 we were never meant to win a grand final, and we came awfully close against the Bulldogs in 88. In 89 we were the hot favourites. You know, and you would have thought that we just went through the motions and things were going all our way. Even after half-time we were very much in a position of winning that grand final. Everything went against us. You know, the field goal that I hit, Wayne Pearce dropping the ball with 2 men overlapped twice, Gary Jack dropping a bomb with 3 minutes to go, Meggsy Neal gets ankle tapped by Mal Meninga with the line light open. It was one of those games, and Bruce Maguire getting penalised for when he's in possession of a ball, tapping the ball forward and calling a shepherd that Harrigan, the referee at the time, penalised him for. I mean, there were so many incidents in that.
One you haven't mentioned yet, though.
Which one was that?
Well, the fact that Ciro and Blocker were pulled off.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, I forgot that one. 2 of the greatest Australian players in the game of rugby league at the time being replaced. To this day, I ask, why would Warren Ryan replace those 2 players? Because back then there was no interchange. There was no.
They weren't coming back.
They weren't coming back.
Yeah.
And you think with 15 minutes to go, you replace two players. It's a third of our pack, Australian players, replaced off, and they just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And you could see it. And when you're looking around and you look for the big boys, the big players at the time when you need them most, extra time. You think, oh my God, they're not there. So we went into extra time and the rest is history.
You'd been in the representative, I guess, shadows for a few years before the 1990 Kangaroo Tour. You're second. Then you get named vice-captain to Mal, but you've still got to get your hooking spot back. And Kerrod Walters has it. Yeah. And then they lose the first test.
I recall it clearly. You know, Kerrod Walters was the incumbent, and there's no way you're going to replace the incumbent if they continue to win. So Australia, against all odds, at Wembley Stadium, capacity crowd, get beat, and they get beat quite well. And Bozo Fulton, normally under a lot of, you know, he's normally under control, very much the master of coaching and knowing exactly what to do, was actually quite flustered. He made 3 very big changes. He brought myself in, he brought Cliffy Lyons and Ricky Stewart into the side for the second test. And that was my moment of my God, you know, finally busted into the Australian test hook and roll. And we had to win that next test. And I think that test there was when Ricky Stewart sent the intercept pass where we were in all sorts of strife, looking to lose the whole series. And remarkably. It was
a miracle.
Yeah. Miracle. Yeah. The 2 Canberra boys again. Yeah. You know, 89 they did it to us against Balmain. They pulled the game out of the fire, and these 2 players, Mal Meninga and Ricky Stewart, were the 2 players that were exceptional in pulling that game and winning that game against all odds.
Let's not forget you were man of the match actually in that particular game. And then you got your spot back, and away you go and win the series.
Well, that's right. Yeah, we did. We won that series, and it was it was a great moment. Of course, it was. You know, it was second test, and we win the second test again with our backs to the wall. We had to win that game to keep the series alive, and we had to, you know, we could not come back home without winning the Ashes. And the third game we played at Ellen Road, and we won that game and won it quite well.
So often, Ben, you seem to be there during these great big, I guess, iconic moments in big matches. 91, you lose the first Origin match, you come back to Sydney, and of course that was the great tussle between Wally Lewis and Mark Geyer, and there you are right in the thick of it. Just explain here, now what are you saying there? Because you've got something to say to Mark.
Mate, it was, that's probably one of the greatest battles of all times. That was Wally Lewis really trying. Wally was a master of manipulating the referee at the time, and he was flustered. And MG just came from nowhere and said, mate, you know, and he started getting. I can't repeat on what was said on that occasion because it was quite colourful.
Yeah, of course.
And it was in, and there was something that MG said, and I said, MG, you can't say that. He goes, I'll leave the rest to you. It was one of those moments where it was a turning point in our game. We came off knowing that we're not going to be bullied by the great Wally Lewis, and MG showed the way, and that's what great forwards do. And you know, MG didn't play too many State of Origin games, but what he did, he certainly left his mark on it.
How cool is it to have another generation of the Elias family now at the top level in the game with Mitchell?
Oh, I'm very proud of him, Tim. He's a wonderful young man. Beautiful, beautiful young man.
This is your sister's boy, yeah?
It's my sister's son, yeah, Mitchell Moses. He's always loved rugby league all of his life. He was a Parramatta supporter. His father was a tragic Parramatta supporter, so he had that influence.
Uncle Ben couldn't talk him around?
I could never. No, but whenever I saw Mitchell at a family function, he always had a football with him, you know. He'd always want to play, you know, in the backyard. He'd want to play a game of touch football with his nephew, with his cousins, and nothing changed. And he loved it in the way he would always have a football playing with the football, and you just knew that this kid had something special about him. And you know, he got better and better. And I started watching him play at SG Ball for Parramatta. And he's certainly got the skills. He's got terrific vision, and you just know that this kid's got it all.
Ben, you've had a marvellous career. It's had its ups and downs, but the brilliant thing about watching you was that one was always certain that you were enjoying every single minute you were on that paddock. So thanks for being part of League Legends and telling us about it all.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's been absolutely my pleasure.
A lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
This has been a Fox League production, part of the Fox Sports Network.